Andy.
Hello and welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment, once we get our interpretation set up. So welcome to today's webinar, and we will get started momentarily. Again, welcome everyone. And once we are able to get our Spanish interpretation set up, we will get started.
Okay. I think we can start.
Okay. I'm going to say a few words and then I will have either Miriam or Johan translate for a moment. So welcome to Challenges for Transition Age Youth and Their Families, Part 2. We are having trouble getting our Spanish interpretation set up. And so if we do not have him with us yet today, and so we will be re-recording this webinar in Spanish and sending it out to all of you. Miriam, would you mind letting everyone know about our Spanish?
Sí, muy buenas tardes a todos. Tenemos programado a un intérprete para hoy. Estamos tratando de conectarnos con él. Bienvenidos a este seminario virtual, retos para los jóvenes en edad de transición con alguna situación de salud mental y para sus familias. Bienvenidos todos a esta presentación.
Thank you. So to get started today, some of you were with us about a year ago when we did our first Raise and NAMI webinar. We had wonderful presentation about transition and mental health. And we had such great feedback and response that we wanted to partner with them again to highlight different materials that Raise and NAMI has worked together to develop to share with all of you. And so I'm going to turn it now over to Miriam for the additional slides.
Um, yes, please, we have a captioning provided by Zoom. If you need captioning, click on CC on your devices. We also have interpretation to Spanish. Tenemos un intérprete para hoy. Y para acceder al canal en español, hagan clic en el icono que indica interpretación y seleccionan español. Y luego oprimen donde dice Mute Original Audio y esto último filtrará completamente la señal en inglés. Estamos tratando de conectarnos con el intérprete, así que por favor tengan paciencia. En caso de que no se llegue a conectar con el intérprete de hoy, vamos a grabar esta presentación en su totalidad en español en los próximos días y luego les daremos el enlace. We also have interpretation for American Sign Language. To pin the interpreter, hover over the video of the participant you want to pin, and then click on the three with it. And again, I'm going to pass it to Josie, who will introduce the presenters for today.
Okay, well, thank you guys again for joining us. And we have two great friends from NAMI who are joining us, Teri and Jennifer. And during this time together, we'll be reviewing some resources on transition planning, demonstrate how to use them, how where to find them, and then we'll also be reviewing additional resources that may be beneficial. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Teri and Jennifer onto our webinar, and thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much, Josie, and thank you, Lauren and Miriam and Dina, who's doing our interpretation, and Johan, who's running all the technical things. So excited to be part of this presentation. For those of you who weren't with us last year, and I think it has been almost a year ago, Josie, where we did an overview of what are we talking about when we talk about transition age youth? What are the issues? How do we prepare? And we got a lot of great feedback, but got a lot of requests for, can we do this again and actually talk through how do you use some of the resources that were shared. So what we want to do today is I'm going to present for the first part of the presentation and walk you through some of the forms and documents that we developed in collaboration with RAISE, and how do you use them? How would you, how are they designed? What would you do with them? Give you some examples. And then my colleague, Jennifer Rothman, who's the Director of Youth and Young Adult Initiatives at NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is going to be sharing some resources that have been developed since the webinar last year. Jen now leads a team of 3 or 4 people. She can tell you specifically, but this is a unit that has grown within NAMI because of the demand for resources and tools for this population. So we wanted her to be able to give you access to some things that weren't available from us last year. And I didn't introduce myself, but I'm the Chief Program Officer at NAMI and am in Mississippi. You'll notice I have a little bit of an accent. I think it's hot where everybody is right now, so I'm not going to complain about our weather, but it's ridiculous down here. And in my role at NAMI, I work primarily with all of our education and support programs, things like Family to Family, NAMI Basics, which is our program for parents and caregivers of children and adolescents with mental health challenges. I developed that program several years ago. It's how I met Lauren many years ago in a training. I won't tell them how long ago, Lauren, but our heart really is all about, at the heart of NAMI, we really are all about helping the individuals and the families find their voice and get what they need and be able to navigate treatment services and have tools that help them kind of weave all the pieces together, if you will. And if you'll go to the next slide, please, Miriam. I noticed that while Lauren was speaking, she put the link in the chat to some of the forms for today. So if you want to go ahead and download those, you're welcome to. It's not necessary. I'll be talking you through them, but if you're one of those folks who likes to print things off and make notes, I wanted to make sure you knew that everything we're going over is available on the website, and Lauren did give you the link. What are we talking about when we talk about transitions? I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir here. If you join this, you're probably either smack in the middle of what is often referred to as the black hole for young adults, that time between turning the age of majority or the age where they can at least have input into their treatment decisions and treatment plan, and when they become an adult. We switch, it can seem, well, and it is overnight frequently for some people because you're so busy living day to day, you don't stop and think about what happens when they turn 18. In some states, it's 16. In some states, in one state, I can't remember which one, but I remember clearly training people for the NAMI Basics program and the age where the youth had a say in whether or not they went into treatment was 14. So this starts early. And again, for many parents, it sneaks up on us. We're busy living life and navigating, and we all of a sudden the world changes out from under us. So those are the primary transitions that we're talking about today, when age changes for the youth and their voice, their input matters, as well as the voice and input of the family or the caregiver, because as the caregiver, our voice doesn't matter quite as much as it used to. So there are changes, but those aren't the only transitions. So for anybody who's joined the call, I think there will be things in this presentation that will be helpful for you, because there are transitions that we all go through above and beyond when the age changes. If there's a change in schools, if there's a change in living situation, if there's a change in therapists or doctors or treatment facilities. I'm looking at some of, when they learn how to drive, moving from elementary school to high school. So again, there are all kinds of transitions. Life is a constant change, and we just kind of have to keep up and try to stay ahead of it. A big key to feeling less stressed and more prepared is thinking through as much of this as you can ahead of time. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. The biggest thing to know is that many of us have survived this. I survived it with my son, who was going through a lot of things when I was writing NAMI basics and traveling around the country training that a lot of years ago. I won't say how many. And now we're going through some things with his 20-month-old daughter. So again, we're always going through something. And it's important to remember that others have gone before us. And as one of my colleagues said years ago, we stand on each other's shoulders. So what Jennifer and I are going to be sharing with you are some things that we know that are tried and true. As a reminder, you'll get the slides for what we're talking about. You'll have a link to the recording, so don't worry if you get lost or if you're not keeping up. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. A few of the tools that the tools we're going to focus on today, because we shared a multitude of these last year in the presentation. And again, Jen has some additional resources for you shortly. But I want to walk you through some specific documents that can be helpful for you at various times during your child's life, regardless of how old they are right now. And I would go so far as to say some of these may be helpful if your child has already reached 21. We're going to go through a prevention planning document, which kind of walks you through all the things you have to think about. The checklist, which talks specifically about timelines for when some of these things need to be thought about or maybe need to be focused on. We're going to go through a portable treatment record. And this is something I didn't share last year, something that's part of the NAMI Basics program. But any of you who've ever tried to get your records from a treatment facility or from a prior school, from a prior therapist or a prior doctor, it can be a nightmare. So we're going to share with you a simple system that you can use to keep up with some of the most important things yourself, so that you have something ready when changes do happen or when crises occur. And then finally, we're going to walk through a youth self-assessment and a family or parent self-assessment. These are documents that will take you through, and they're actually almost an interview guide, a discussion guide for thinking through as the adult, how prepared are you and what are your goals? And for the youth or young adult, what are their goals? If you'll go to the next slide, please. The bottom line with all of these documents is that it really is all about collaboration. It's all about engagement. This is not about, and when I say family, please know, or when I say caregiver, I'm talking in the very broadest sense of the word. Sometimes this is a parent, sometimes it's a grandparent, sometimes it's an aunt or an uncle. It can even be a trusted teacher at school. So whoever the person is who is helping the young adult navigate their care and their services, that's who we're talking about. And putting these plans together or thinking through this planning really involves everybody. It involves that caregiver. It involves the young adult, the youth or young adult. It involves the school, the medical team, the therapeutic team, anybody, physical therapist, occupational therapist, whoever happens to be involved with the individual to help them get what they need. So keep that in your mind as we're talking through all of this. If you have the forms that are in front of you, and if you don't worry, because you're going to have a link and you can get all of them after the presentation. But the prevention planning for transition-aged youth is a 3-page document that walks you through what I call the big ticket items. What is prevention planning? And think about prevention planning in this sense as being prepared, preventing yourself from being caught off guard. These same steps, these same topics or major points, the big ticket items can relate to a transition plan, a crisis plan, a relapse plan. So think about this instead of maybe the word prevention, and I probably ought to actually change this word, this is a prep plan. What do you need to know when you're preparing for managing situations? So this walks through why is it important to plan? Who needs to be involved? When does it begin? When do we do this planning? What does it look like? What does the plan look like? Is there a template? Is there a document? Is there some magic formula? And then the last 2 pages are actually what the process that can look like. It takes you through kind of step by step, starting the conversation with your youth or your young adult, and how to actually make that happen. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I just wanted you to know, you can see by just looking at the screenshot of it, there's a lot of just big ticket items for what's included in each of those topics to jog your memory. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about this. The checklist is the next document. And again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, but when you're able to download this walks you through what to think about it. When do you start? And bottom line is it's never too early to start. But certainly by the time your child is 12 or 14, start thinking about what's gonna be coming next. How do you be prepared? Find out what to expect from your school. Find out what to expect from your treatment provider. That many times, once a person turns 18, they have to see a different therapist or a different psychiatrist. Depending on what kind of services your loved one is involved in, those changes may happen. So this checklist is talking you through what to think about. You can't know what nobody's told you. So this checklist is letting you know what to think about at different ages and the questions to ask. And if you find out nothing's going to change, that's great, but at least you've asked and so that you're not shocked when they hit one of those milestone birthdays. And specifically, you'll see these are talking about treatment processes, and treatment is not necessarily just seeing a therapist or seeing a psychiatrist. That can be a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, someone who's working with you on reading disabilities or other types of disabilities. I spent the morning this morning with my 20-month-old granddaughter, and she has speech therapy, PT, and OT 3 mornings a week. So again, there are a lot of different things that our kids can be involved in. And these 2 documents are kind of your table of contents. That's another good way to look at them, to give your brain a prompt for, oh, I need to think about that. And these are the components that I need to be exploring. If you'll go to the next slide. And I want to spend some time diving into this one a little bit. And what you see is a screenshot. This is actually included in NAMI's Navigating a Mental Health Crisis Guide. We're in the process of updating this right now, but the document won't change tremendously. This is what we refer to. It's in NAMI Basics. It's in several of our other NAMI programs as a portable treatment record. What we encourage families to do is develop some kind of record-keeping system for yourself. And many of you probably have this already. You may have a spiral notebook, you may have a file folder, you may have a computer file, you may have an app on your smartphone where you track some of this critical information. So the important thing is not so much what does it look like or what kind of process you use. The important thing is to have a process, and portable is the key. Something that you can take with you, either if you are going to be seeing a new therapist, or let's say you're on a trip. Let's say you're out of town, you're on vacation, or you're visiting family, and your child has a crisis of some sort, and you end up having to go to the emergency department. Having something with you that has a summary of their history can save everyone tons of time and help get your child what they need sooner rather than later. The types of things that are included in this portable treatment record are basic demographic information, birth date, social security numbers, Medicare, Medicaid numbers, insurance numbers, who is the emergency contact. And you may say, why would I need to put that down? Because that's me frequently. Well, think about if you happen to be out of town, if you're fortunate enough to get a respite weekend, you're out of town, and whoever's taking care of your loved one needs to know who's the other emergency contact if you're not there. The physician's information, the psychiatrist information, any treatment facilities where the person, your loved one, is actively seeking treatment. Again, having all of that documented in one place saves you having to dig for it if you're in a crisis situation or in a stressful situation like seeing a new provider. Additionally, in here are medical history. What allergies does your loved one have? What medication allergies specifically? What's the medication and what's the reaction that they have? Any medications that your loved one has taken, not just psychiatric or psychotropic medications. I'm allergic to ibuprofen, and I don't want anybody giving me ibuprofen. That seems silly, but the effects are pretty drastic for me. So any medication allergies, any major medical illnesses. You know, if your loved one has asthma or has diabetes or has a seizure disorder of some sort, you want to have, again, and so I hope you're getting the idea. This is having a snapshot. You're not going into great detail, but it's just hitting the high points, if you will, of the medical history. Also procedures. You know, if your loved one recently had their gallbladder removed, you know, or had some kind of sinus surgery. Again, this doesn't have to be a procedure related to their condition that they're getting treatment for, but anything that might be helpful for someone else who's involved in their circle of care to know. Diagnoses and hospitalizations. You know, whatever diagnoses have been given to your child or loved one, have them there. You know, what is, and this, you know, can be, we've already talked about having major medical conditions, but if your loved one has been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, you know, if they've been diagnosed with an attention disorder or an intellectual disability of some sort, have those down there. And any times they might have been in inpatient care for those services. Medication record. What medications, we've already talked about allergies. What do we want to avoid? But also having a list of what current medications are. This can get quite lengthy, again, especially if you've got several conditions going on at the same time, which many of us have that with ourselves and with our loved one. So having a current medication record. The last two are very much a part of the prevention planning, if you will. If you think about prevention planning being prepared, the crisis plan and the relapse plan. There's a template in this portable treatment record for developing the crisis plan and the relapse plan. The crisis plan specifically is something that is filled out by the individual and the caregiver at a time when there's not a crisis going on. You don't want to do this when you've just gotten back from the emergency department, but at some point in time when things are going well, maybe it's a Sunday afternoon or a lazy Saturday afternoon and it's raining, talk through this. You know, and you can do this with individuals, youth and young adults, as early as 10 or 12. Talk through them. What are we going to do if a crisis occurs again? Because odds are it will. So talking through with them, doing some planning, what are we going to do? So in the crisis plan, it's asking you specifically to list 2 emergency resources. Again, not just you, but who else? Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a religious leader that you're close to, maybe it's a grandparent, but who is a backup emergency contact person? Who's the physician? And then it's asking you if we need help. And there are 5 different blocks when you're able to open this document. There are 5 different options. It's asking you to think through 5 different steps that you're going to go through if there's a crisis. Okay. So the first step may be that you call your backup resource. Ideally, not ideally, this is intended for the family, whoever's caring for the individual, but it should be developed in collaboration with the young adult so that they have a say in it. So the first step is we're going to call the backup as an example. It's my daughter-in-law. She's my backup. So that's the first step. I'm going to call her to come and help me with the situation. If things still aren't getting resolved, maybe the second step is I call the therapist or the case manager. Maybe the third step is that I call 988. And maybe the fourth step is 911. And that really is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because you just heard my beeper go off. My time is theoretically up for Jennifer, so I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. But we now have 988. That has not been around that long, but if there's a mental health or behavioral health emergency, you can call 988 and you don't have to call 911 first. The purpose of 988 is to get a mental health response rather than always getting law enforcement. But be aware that sometimes 911 may be your only option. And it's important on the crisis planning to have that conversation with your loved one, talking through with them. How will we know if things are serious enough that we need to call 911? It can make it easier for you as a family member to make those calls if you've had the conversation ahead of time with your loved one. There's an old adage of hope for the best and prepare for the worst. You always want to be ready for worst case scenario. The relapse plan is very similar to the crisis plan, but we're asking you to talk with your loved one about what do we notice when things start to go bad. When symptoms start to return or behavior problems get started again, what's the first thing we notice? And it asks you to list 3 things. Frequently, it's a change in appetite, sleep, or mood. Frequently, those are the 3 things we notice first, but we don't think about it until the crisis occurs and we're looking back, right? So we're going to ask you at a time when all is going well to think about what do you notice first, and then talk about what you can do when those things start to surface again. So if sleep disturbances begin to occur, what are you going to do now versus waiting on them to get worse? And if we go to the next slide, please. Jen, I promise I'm going to speed up. Look, we can go ahead and skip it. I actually had walked you through the crisis plan and I forgot. That's what happens when I don't look at my notes and I'm just going. So when you get the actual PowerPoint presentation, you'll see I'm giving you the big ticket items on the crisis plan and the relapse plan. If you'll go to the next one, please. So the next 2 forms, the next 2 documents are, one is getting the youth's perspective. The other is getting the family member's perspective. And these are very similar, but they're 2 very different documents, 2 very different resources. And I want you to think about them as discussion guides because they very much are. For example, the youth one says, what do you want your future to look like? It's talking you through how do you have that conversation with your young adult? What are your goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your greatest fears? So it literally gives you even the prompt questions to have that conversation to help drill down what your loved one wants. What are their goals? What are they thinking? It's important when you're digging into these assessment forms that you know that we don't fill it out today and this is it, we're set for forever. It's a lot like any other planning. You have to revisit it as things change. Your loved one, your child, whoever this person is that you're concerned about, is a totally different human being at 12 than they are at 15. Totally different again at 18. So revisit these plans frequently, have these conversations. These discussion guides can be used regardless of whether the child is 10 or whether they're 21. These are conversations I would go so far as to say I had conversations like this with both of my adult children when they were in college, almost in their 30s. So they're good prompts for the question to help them think through and drill down on what it is they really want. And you can see on this list, there is an education section, work goals, living, transportation. It goes through all, and they're really life focused. They're not treatment focused, they're life focused, because the idea is that if you can get an understanding of what your loved one wants, then you work with the care team to put together how we get there. If you'll go to the next slide, there's a very similar form, but it's focused on the parent. You know, what do you want as an adult? What do you want as the caregiver for your loved one? What you'll find frequently, so I'm going to go ahead and prepare you for this, is if you do this with your 15-year-old and you've gone through and you filled out the youth form together, and then you filled out yours, when you compare them, you're going to be up here and down here. You know, I don't think it's ever going to happen that you're both going to be in the same place, because we all see things a little bit differently. If you go into this process expecting that and understanding that that's part of why you're going through this process, is so you can get as close to the same page as possible, so that you can support your loved one. That really is what this is all about. It's about the conversations. All of these documents can be kept in a binder or a file folder or somewhere, so that you can have access to them as things occur at school, in treatment, again, with different types of therapists. I hope this gives you some kind of an idea about how to use the tools. There's no magic. It's using them, walking through them, thinking about them. If you'll go to the next slide, please. This is just a reminder slide that plans change. These are the 4 major components that your benefits experts, we didn't even talk about, but you have to think about Medicaid, Medicare, disability, SSI, those types of things. And if we'll go to the next slide, the biggest thing to know is that you have to take care of yourself as well. We frequently say at NAMI that if you're on an airplane, they tell you to put on your oxygen mask first. If the cabin loses oxygen, we tell you the same thing at NAMI. You have to be able to take care of yourself if you're going to take care of your loved one. You can't pour from an empty cup. One way of doing that is having better navigation tools and having support from the people who have been there, done that. And now, Jen, forgive me, but if you can come on and walk everybody through some of the new tools that your team has developed.
Thank you, Teri, and thank you as always for sharing such amazing information for our families, caregivers, anyone who is, leading these steps that are being taken for our young people, our youth and our young adults. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as Teri had mentioned towards the beginning, I figured I would take just a moment to introduce myself and the work that we're doing as part of the Youth and Young Adult Initiatives team within the Office of Innovation. As you can tell, the word innovation really just means that NAMI is taking some big steps and trying some new things when it comes to reaching different populations and communities across the country. Specifically, my job is to work with a team of 4 amazing people to address different areas of life and community within youth and young adults. So that means we have a staff person that really focuses on colleges and campus and college age youth, and also, high schools. We have someone who has been focusing on trauma and trauma-informed practices, as well as someone who's really working with young people directly. And we have a group of 10 young adults called NAMI Next Gen, and they work with us to provide feedback and their opinions and perspectives to really help mold the work that we're doing, because we want to make sure that whatever we are creating is actually useful, that it is addressing a topic or a situation issue that young people are really dealing with. And the same goes for our educators when we create our back to school resources, any type of parent or caregiver or family member. And I wanted to be able to give a little bit of background before jumping into some of the resources that are currently available all on NAMI.org. And then also the handouts that are in the chat. If you go to that link, there's one full handout with all these links that you can access. So NAMI is trying to bridge the gap. We're trying to provide as much guidance as possible on some of these, issues that you're seeing with your transition age youth. As Teri was talking through a lot of the steps and processes and the different types of transitions, I realized how many different transitions I am dealing with my family right now. I've got a 15-year-old driving, getting ready to get her license. I've got an 11-year-old who is now going to be starting in middle school. I've got a bonus child who is 5 and will be starting kindergarten. So there's a lot of transitions, a lot of different ages, and of course, keeping up with them and having the resources to help support myself and my husband, as well as our young people in our lives, is so important. So NAMI, is having conversations around social media, how to be safe on social media, and giving our parents and caregivers the tools and ideas and suggestions around how to support their young people who are dabbling in social media. We can't stop it. They have their phones or their iPads or YouTube in front of them. It seems a little bit more than they're supposed to, but this is how they find connection, how they are, finding people like them and actually finding themselves in some ways. But we want to make sure that they're doing this safely. A big piece that we actually have created rather recently is how to be a trusted adult. So we have resources that talk about, how to be prepared as an adult, whether it's for your own child or family member, or even just young children and youth in your life. It could be cousins or nieces and nephews, or if you've ever volunteered as a coach. If they come to you with a situation, how do you react to that? How do you, set boundaries to even protect yourself so that you don't become almost a fill-in therapist for this young person? How, you can connect them with resources or talking with their parents and giving those resources. But this was something that really came up, that our young people just don't have the language to really talk to adults. And so we're trying more to educate young people on what languages to use. And we want our adults to be ready when they come to them. And then, like I mentioned, we have, different back to school resources for everyone involved in back to school, because that is a huge transition. Just buying the supplies for school and going by that long list and walking through the aisles is a situation in itself. I myself am going to be doing that in the next week. And then just really, you can see on the slide some of the different things that we cover, but we just want to make sure that in every step of your family's life and in working with young people, that we have just some different resources and tips and suggestions, so you just don't feel like you're going at this alone. Next slide, please. So I try to take some screenshots to really give you an idea of, some of the resources and how they're organized on our website. Like I said, the links will be in that one pager with all the handouts and the slides, et cetera. But, for supporting parents and caregivers directly, I will say that on NAMI.org, most of our resources that are geared specifically to parents and caregivers will be found under the Kids tab. But that really walks through how to navigate the school system, working with your teachers, knowing your child's rights. How do you find a mental health care professional? Tips and suggestions on how to talk to the young person in your life about, different behaviors that you've noticed, to really talk to them about their mental health and some of those, tougher subjects. It also goes through discussing some, issues around transition and just a lot of conversation starters. Because what we hear a lot from parents and caregivers is they just don't know how to go about talking to their young people about some of these topics. And we know it's hard. And at different age levels, you always have to make sure that you're being age appropriate as well. Next slide. And we also go over some of the tougher topics. Like I had mentioned earlier with social media and your family, we put together a lot of information around that. This was a request that came from one of our partners that we work with at National, and we put a lot of time and effort. I'm sure some of you have seen kind of that back and forth research and discussing, how bad is social media? And then there's never really a definitive answer. So that's why we just try to provide the information we can to keep all of our young people safe. We also discuss topics around suicide and how to have those conversations, how to ask the question, different warning signs that you need to keep an eye out for, some of the protective factors. So making sure that there's support around this young person and that they have a group of people that they feel connected to and that they trust and that they can talk to. And then, of course, having things like a crisis plan and a relapse plan that Teri had talked about earlier is definitely helpful in case a crisis appears. And we, of course, you can see we talk about what a crisis is in case you're sitting there. Well, what exactly constitutes a crisis? When do I take these steps? When am I contacting everyone? And there will be some differences for different families as well. And then we continue to hear more and more about bullying. And, as our young people change and take on new things and discover themselves and figure out who they are, their likes and dislikes, and different peer groups. We are continuing to hear about bullying and some of the unfortunate actions that take place if a child is bullied for too long. So being able to support your child, whether they're being bullied or they are doing the bullying, and being able to recognize those signs, how to step in, how to support, how to work with the schools, because it's a tough world out there for our young people, and it doesn't stop when they leave school. It continues, with the smartphones and the internet and everything else. How are we providing resources to really give these young people a safe space at home? Next slide, please. Oh, I thought that there was one more slide, but I will say, sorry, Teri, then I'll pass it back. But I really would encourage you to definitely take a look at some of the different resources on that one pager. Some of them are just engaging activities to do as a family, whether you do wellness days or have different questions that you can ask when you sit down at the table for family dinner time, or during the school breaks. There's different activities that you can do at home and just ways to keep engaging as a family, because we know that the more time you can spend together as a family, the more you can have these conversations with your child, the more support and grounding they're going to have. And it opens up that door of communication. So I encourage you to look at those resources. Do a little clicking around on NAMI.org. There's a Your Journey, and it goes kids, teens, and young adults. And of course, we're going to continue creating things, because as we hear what's needed in the field, out in the communities and the schools, we do our best to answer that call. So thank you. And Teri, did you want to finish up?
Thanks, Jen. Just look for the natural bridges. It's possible to navigate this. As I said in the very beginning, there are many who've gone before you, and there will be many who come after you. It's possible. Look for the help. Look for the natural bridges. Groups like NAMI, like RAISE, like the National Federation of Families. There are so many groups out there of caring individuals whose major goals really are to make things a little bit easier for those coming after them by helping you know what to do and how to start and how to navigate and supporting you in the process. One of the things that we didn't mention at the beginning about NAMI, for any of you who aren't familiar with us, is there's 650 NAMI chapters across the country. There's a state NAMI organization in every state and Washington, D.C., and there are about 600 different affiliates or local chapters. When you go to NAMI.org, you can click on Find My Local NAMI, and it'll connect you to the one that's the closest to you. And NAMI is run primarily by volunteers out in the field. Again, family members and people who have lived through these situations themselves, either with a mental illness or with other co-occurring conditions, and can help you get through that and can support you. And if you'll go to the next one. Most important message today, we've showed you some tools, we've showed you some puzzle pieces. The biggest thing for you is be aware that it is a puzzle. Know that it is. It's not just hard for you, it's hard for everybody. So know that going in, know what the key pieces are, where to look, how to ask the question. And remember, this is all about growing up. It's not about growing apart. There's a big difference in growing up and growing apart. So with that, Lauren, we will take any questions people may have. I have not been watching the chat, but any questions people have, Jennifer and I are happy to try to answer them. We're also very happy to say, gosh, I have no idea, but we can go dig for you and see what we can find out.
Okay, Teri, so we did have a few folks that were asking specifically for links and things, and because they couldn't copy from the chat. So we did let them know that they will be getting an email that has a link to the slides and all the handouts. We also had a question on what is NAMI Basics, which I answered. I said, I said it's a class for families of children with challenging behaviors. It's available in English and Spanish, in person or online, and I put the link. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
But as I stammer, that's the gist of it. And again, I met Lauren when she was in one of the trainings to become a teacher of the program. And I remember learning so much from you, Lauren. That's the thing about what we do, is we're all constantly learning from each other.
Exactly.
But basics is we called it basics for that reason. You know, what are the big ticket items that you need to think about? One of the classes focuses specifically on the school and the mental health system, navigating IEPs. That's Greek for us when we first start down the road of, do I need a 504? Do I need an IEP? We frequently have families tell us, you know, I didn't know that I could bring someone to the IEP meeting. I didn't know that I could ask for an IEP review. There are so many things that we just don't know. And it's not that the schools are bad or the mental health professionals are bad. They don't think to tell us. And assume that we know, and it's very complex. Ross Green, who is the guru of collaborative and proactive solutions, and he has a wonderful website called Lives in the Balance if you're looking for other resources on how to work collaboratively with your loved one. Did a video for us years ago about basics, and he says, if you think there's something going on with your child, take the course. If it turns out there's nothing going on, it was just a situational something, that's great, but you've learned some resources. So there are tools that can help just in navigating childhood and adolescence. But specifically, how do you sort out what's a real challenging behavior versus what's a typical 13-year-old's behavior? How do you know if there's a difference in something you need to get help with? So thank you for that question.
We have a few more. I'm trying to answer them in writing and also give them to you. One person, let's see, asked about if there were specifically resources for the intersection of mental health and LGBTQ plus community. And I said yes. And I did put the link from NAMI National. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
just I keep stammering, Lauren. Sorry for that. There's so much. There's so much that we continue to learn about. And you certainly won't find everything that you need there at the site, but what you will see if you go in and explore NAMI's website is we have in the last 2 years, literally, and this is part of Jen's team and other similar teams, one being an inclusion and equity team at NAMI, we've begun trying to acknowledge all of the various scenarios that can make mental health conditions or anything in our life an additional challenge to navigate. So there is some specific LGBTQ plus information that's on there, as well as links and resources to other organizations in this space. One of the things I'm truly proud about NAMI, and Lauren, I think the same is true with RAISE, is we very much acknowledge we don't have all the answers, and we're more than happy to help people find other folks in the space who are also sharing information. Because we have to be able to look at everything that's out there and then make the best decision for ourselves.
Okay, and I'm still looking at, there's a bunch of questions, so I'm trying to, someone asked about, they really like this presentation. Can you share part one? I gave them the link for that.
Oh, good. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, there you go. And someone else again asked if there's classes that address challenging behaviors and possible strategies. And again, I would recommend NAMI Basics. And for older teens and young adults, I would recommend Family to Family.
And it really depends on what's going on with your child. Family to Family is a program for any family member, caregiver, loved one. It can be a next door neighbor of an adult with a mental health condition. And when I say it depends on what's going on, you may have an 18-year-old who is fully independent, living on their own. They've kind of cut their ties with you. You're trying to figure out how you can be helpful, even if they don't want you. Family to Family would probably be the most appropriate, but your loved one may be 21, but still living at home with you, finishing up in the public school system, and Basics may have more information. So talking with your local NAMI chapter will help. The other thing about NAMI Basics is there's a version called NAMI Basics on Demand, where you can literally take it asynchronously at your own pace. You can kind of click through the class. Since COVID, all of NAMI's programs are also live taught virtually. So there are a lot of different options for the information.
Okay, and then we had someone who asked, looking at the NAMI resources, is there a way to get an editable document as long as it's, credited to NAMI?
I would, and I'm not sure which one they're talking about specifically. I would guess, because again, this is me, I want a Word document of all those forms that we went over, so I could make changes to the templates. And that's something, Lauren, that I'm happy to make available to you, or the Word versions of each of those.
I can do that. I can take care of that for you. And we'll put it on the website.
And the plan, where I think I mentioned that we're updating NAMI's crisis guide, which is where that portable treatment record came from, also in the process of updating NAMI Basics. Both will be done by the end of this year and available. And the intention is to have, what do they call it? Fillable PDFs. So that there's a PDF, but you can have the space to fill in the blanks on those types forms that will be on the website. I know Jennifer's laughing at me because I always struggle over those techie things.
We also had someone that said that PTI's Parent Training and Information Centers are
Yes.
helpful. So I'll put the link in the chat there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another great resource.
Okay. And
again, this is one of those areas where, we were not so different from everybody else, where we've talked about being diverse and being inclusive for a long time, and really just started putting our money where our mouth is a few years ago, and developing the resources and dedicating the time to dig into what do people need. And acknowledging that, much like you can't be a therapist and just hang out a shingle and say, come ye and I will help you. that you've got to meet people where they are. So thank you for that question. And again, I'm going to put my email in the chat right now, Lauren, if you didn't already, and feel free to email.
Got it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and then we had somebody ask about resources for families and caregivers. And so I did put the link in the question and answer, you know, the resources for family caregivers that's on the national website.
Yes. Another thing that might be helpful, Lauren, that's not up there as a resource is NAMI.org/ask-the-expert. NAMI hosts, our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Ken Duckworth, hosts an Ask the Expert webinar session every month. Our team supports that for him. And we bring in different experts in different areas. For example, you know, we had the group come in and talk about RAPs, Wellness Recovery Action Plans. We'll have a researcher come on and talk about the latest research in bipolar disorder. We had someone right before the holidays last year who talked about music therapy. So if you go, and all of those, much like this webinar, those sessions are recorded. There's a transcript available, the PowerPoint. So if you go to NAMI.org/ask-the-expert, you may see a topic there that you want to learn more about in one of these areas. We've done some specifically on, the one we did last month was on helplines and warm lines. And we had the Trevor Project on, who talked about having a warm line specifically for people with LGBTQ interests. And it's so look around. There's a lot of information there. Thank you for putting that in there.
Sure, and we're getting a lot of thank yous. I think that's all. Oh, are there any free webinars or trainings for parents and caregivers of young children and young adults with autism? I'm going to mention again that NAMI Basics covers challenging behaviors. So it covers ADHD, Tourette's, autism, not just mental illness.
Absolutely. And that's true with all of NAMI's programs, Lauren. We don't ask for a diagnosis. We don't ask for documentation. If you're interested in the topic and you have lived experience, then you are welcome to come and learn, because so many, as you guys know on this call, so many of the challenging behaviors are similar, regardless of the diagnosis or the combination of diagnoses. And all of NAMI's programs are free. Many of the programs offered by some of the various organizations we've mentioned are free of charge to participants. So yeah.
I think that's it.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so
thank
very
all.
much. Yeah,
Thank
Teri,
all.
Jennifer, this
Yes,
is
thank
always
you.
awesome. Thank you guys for the resources and always being so open to connect with individuals that have questions. So thank you. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And our next webinar is in September on youth engagement products. So we hope to see you there. If we don't see you at the RAISE Summit, which is next week, if you have not registered, you can still register for our virtual event on our website. So hope you all have a great week, and we will talk again. Thanks. Bye.